This is James Luxon. I'm delighted to be joined once again with Andy Clarke. Andy, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good, good. Can't complain. You?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, mate. Thanks for joining me again today. Today, we're going to talk about the huge fight in Saudi Arabia in February, Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. First of all, what are your initial thoughts of that fight being made?
Well, relief that it's happening, I think, is the first thing because we've all wanted to see it for what seems like a long time. We've all wanted to see a fight for undisputed at heavyweight for, by the time this fight comes around, not far off 6 years, because that's how long it's been where all four belts have been shared by two people. The identities of them have changed at times, but that's a situation we've had. And for a combination of reasons, it hasn't happened. And it was getting to the point where I was wondering if it ever would. So I'll be relieved if I'm there on February the 17th or watching and the first bell goes and we've got Fury in one corner and Usyk in the other. I've no reason to believe that won't happen. So that's my first kind of thoughts on it. As for the matchup itself, I do find it fascinating because I probably do still make Fury a favourite because I think he has the skill set, if he's on top of his game, to make the significant size difference count. And I don't think that we will see the Fury we saw against Ngannou against Usyk. I absolutely don't. But having seen how under par he was on that night, and I think the reason for it was that he just didn't believe for 1 second that Ngannou was any kind of a threat. And when you don't believe that the person in front of you is capable of really causing you any problems, let alone beating you, then that often translates into a poor performance. So I think that's what we saw there. I don't expect to see anything other than a well-prepared and top of his game Fury, because he is a big game fighter. But having said that, what we did see against Ngannou, I'm contradicting myself now to an extent, it does make me wonder. And it does, I think, it makes me give Usyk more of a chance than I gave him before. And I already gave him a decent chance, probably about 70-30, I would say. Whereas now I may be narrowing that to more like 60-40. So it is an intriguing matchup. There's no two ways about it. And I just can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see it. I don't necessarily think it's going to catch fire from the beginning, because what you've got the two fighters who are incredibly good at just backing themselves to respond and react and find a way of coming to terms with and ultimately besting whatever the other person does, to the point where they can kind of wait to see what the other person does. So I think it could be quite cagey to start with. And I do expect it to be close. Fury says he's going to try and knock Usyk out, and I believe that he will try and knock him out. I think that'll be easier said than done. So I think when we get to the end of the fight, which I think we will, I don't think we're going to be absolutely sure which way it's going to go necessarily.
Interesting point you made there, Andy, was how you now give Usyk a slightly better chance after the Ngannou performance from Fury than he did before that. Before the Ngannou performance, a lot of people felt that this could be an easy fight for Fury. After Usyk's performance against Dubois, they felt the blueprint was the body, attack the body, and he will go down. Do you feel that Usyk now will feel the same about Fury after seeing his performance against Ngannou and feel like actually he's a bit easier to beat than I first thought he would be?
That's kind of the interesting thing, because I don't know whether he will or not, because watching him at ringside, and I was there against Ngannou, and I could see him, Alexander Usyk. He was kind of opposite. He was on the opposite side of the ring to me, kind of diagonally off to my left-hand side, but I could see him. And obviously the TV cameras are picking him out every now and again. And I think he was just kind of bewildered, really, by what he saw from Fury against Ngannou. Ngannou, was definitely a lot better than we thought he was going to be. Good fundamentals. He could take a shot. He's obviously got properly heavy hands. I was really impressed with him. He was much, much better than I thought he was going to be. But having said that, Fury was woefully under par, and I don't think anybody would argue with that. He wouldn't argue with it, I'm sure. And Usyk was watching it, and I think he was just wondering, what the hell's going on here? Because we're supposed to be fighting on December the 23rd, but the way this is going, you might even lose. And that's kind of the figure that he cut. So I don't think he really knows what to think about it. But if you look at it just purely rationally, Fury's in his mid-30s now, so's Usyk. And Fury hasn't always lived the life. You had that long period out where he was doing all sorts. And that at some point maybe will catch up with him. It could be catching up with him now. You know, these are questions that we don't really know the answers to. I don't think it's possible that he really trained properly for that fight against Ngannou. I don't see how he could have, because it's not all down to mentality when that bell goes. If the mentality isn't there in training camp, where you feel like the person in front of you might beat you, then you're just not going to attack it with the same kind of intensity as he would have done for the training camps against Wilder, for example. He just wouldn't have done. And if you don't, then that just seeps in. And as I said, it translates to an underperformance for all sorts of different reasons. So I don't feel like he can have trained properly for that fight. So there's a good chance that we'll see the best Fury we've ever seen against Usyk, because he is that kind of bloke. He may well rebound in incredible fashion, but also he might not. You know, it might be that he has started to slide, because if you think about it, that third fight against Wilder was a hell of a hard fight, a really, really hard fight. And he won it. But something like that takes something away from you, because he got put down twice. And it was a brutal, brutal battle. And since then, he's boxed Dillian Whyte, who didn't present him with any problems whatsoever, and Derek Chisora, who didn't either. So those two fights were magnificent occasions at Wembley and Spurs, but they were kind of spars in a sense. And I say that without wishing to denigrate either Dillian Whyte or Derek Chisora, but that really is what they were when you watched them. So it's a long time since he's had to really go to the well, which he had to against Wilder. Is he capable of doing it again? As fighters get older, you don't know the answers to these questions. Fury will say, of course he is, that he knows he is, but he doesn't even really know, actually, until it happens. And that's the situation fighters are in, any athletes in, really, as they get older. But in boxing, it's different, because they fight so infrequently. They will get their answer at some point, and it will appear as though it's come out of the blue, like it's happened overnight, because the last time you saw them, it wasn't the case. And then the next time you see them, you think to yourself, hang on a second, what's happened? Well, what's happened is that they've got that bit older. They haven't had a really hard fight for a while, and it turns out that they can't really do it anymore. You've seen it a number of times down the years. So that's what makes this really interesting for me, is that there are lots of questions there that we don't really know the answer to. And you mentioned the Dubois fight for Usyk, and again, that is interesting, because I was at that fight, and the way that people have framed it is generally, as you said there, that he's maybe got that weakness to the body. And we saw that in the amateurs a few times, that the only times he really looked vulnerable were to body attacks. I didn't really understand the kind of debate about whether it was a foul or not. People talked about a low blow. All right, it wasn't really low, as in geographically low, but it was a foul because he hit him on the protector. And by definition, if you hit someone on the protector, then it's a foul. So I didn't really understand how it became. Well, I did understand how it became such a big talking point, but for me, it was quite clear. And outside of that, I felt that Usyk pretty much won every round, really. But if you're a Fury fan, I think that there probably is enough there to give you more encouragement. But as is always the case, you can kind of see what you want to see to suit and tailor your own argument. I think that's definitely the case here. All I want is for both of them to turn up in February right on the top of their game. And I feel like if that happens, I think Fury will win in a close fight, because he's got the ability and boxing skills and IQ to make the size count.
In terms of their last performances, they both walked away with their critics. Now, do you think that will either give them both the extra 1% to prove them wrong, or could they walk into this fight with a bit of added pressure from having the critics?
I think it's kind of both, really. I don't think they'll feel too much more pressure, not from outside anyway. The pressure when you get to this level, when you're as experienced as they are, is the pressure you put on yourself. Really, that's what pressure is for them, and it's significant because they put themselves under an enormous amount of pressure because they expect an awful lot. And that's how they've got to where they are. As for whether some of the criticism will have stung them or not, I think for Usyk he won't really be that bothered because I think they'll feel that the UK media and Team Dubois created a storm around something that never really was one. But this is the game we're in, and of course they're going to do that. I think Fury, I think he probably will be a bit stung by the performance against Ngannou and by the reaction to it, because I think he will care about that. I think he will. He obviously he knows that in that encounter it was kind of boxing versus MMA, and I think he will feel that he didn't uphold his end of the bargain, that he didn't really, as heavyweight champion of the world, boxing's heavyweight champion of the world, he didn't perform in the way that he should have. I asked him about it actually at the press conference for the announcement of the fight. He hadn't really talked about it too much, and he came over to talk to me and Fabio Wardley, and I said, have you got it out of your system yet, the Ngannou experience? How was that? How was the week or so afterwards? And he didn't really want to answer it. He basically said, I don't know, what are you on about? I got paid a fortune. I've been picking out yachts and Ferraris, and just kind of moved on from it. So I didn't really push it any further because it was clear he didn't really want to discuss it. But I think it would have stung him. So out of the two, given their most recent performances, I think Fury will maybe be able to use his as a little bit more fuel for the flames, if you like. But I don't think there's any universe in which Fury has ever thought that Usyk is anything other than a really hard fight. And I think that's why it's taken this long to make it. Not because he was ever in any way fearful of fighting him. Nobody's scared at that level. In boxing, pretty much full stop. No one's scared. They just want to hold out for the best deal they can possibly get. And that's why it's taken the time it's taken to do it, because Usyk for Fury represents the largest possible risk. Therefore, he has to represent the largest possible reward. That's how it works.
Absolutely. Just finally, I want to make a comparison to a fight that has a lot of similarities with this one, and that was going back over 30 years ago, and that's Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield. Obviously Holyfield coming up from cruiserweight, Lennox Lewis being that heavyweight, the man at heavyweight division. But in terms of some stats, in terms of their heights, Lennox was 6'5", Tyson 6'7", Holyfield 6'2", and Usyk 6'3". And in terms of their reach, Lennox had an 84-inch reach, Fury has an 85-inch reach. Holyfield and Usyk both at 78-inch reach. So very, very similar in terms of their heights and reaches. Going into this fight, could we see a similar outcome from that fight?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely could. I mean, I do expect it to be close. Like I said, I mean, they're very different, those pairs of fighters. You look at the way, although the more recent Fury is more similar to Lewis than the previous Fury incarnation. The heavyweight who would move like a middleweight. He has abandoned that really since, or for that second Wilder fight. Since then, he's been much more seek and destroy. And if you speak to him, that seems to be what he wants to do. That's how he wants to do it. Traditional heavyweight boxing, where you go for the knockout. He's with Sugar Hill now, who's obviously the Kronk, Emmanuel Stewart, and that was the gym for looking for the knockout. That's what they always want to do. So I do expect him to try and finish it within the distance against Usyk. When you have that mentality, it's not about going out there swinging and looking for it from the first punch. If you catch someone early with something they don't see and they're not braced for, then that can happen. But generally at that level, you'll feel that it will be a longer job, but whatever, you're still looking to finish it inside the distance. So the Fury we see now is more like Lewis, I guess, than the Fury we used to know. Holyfield and Usyk, I'd say, are really pretty different. You know, you look at the way that Usyk boxes. Holyfield was a fighter with just incredible toughness and incredible heart and skills, obviously too. But it was that toughness and that heart and you know, shall we say, a little bit of a careless use of the head at times. He was a fairly unpleasant fighter to come up against. Usyk presents a different problem, I think, a different kind of skill set, but I don't think that he lacks in the minerals department in any way. So yeah, I mean, I think it could. I think it in as much as I think it will be close. Yeah, I think it could be. I think it could be fairly. It could be fairly similar. I mean, what do you think about it?
I think for me, it's a chess match. It's very much the two best, in my opinion, tacticians at heavyweight. I think they're very similar. Just Fury's a bigger version of Usyk, in my opinion. But like I say, it is interesting the change that Tyson has made, the adaptation since going to Sugar Hill Steward. Like you say, where it's more stand your ground, try and stop your opponent. And that potentially could be a difference, whether that's in his favour or against his favour. I think that could be a deciding factor on what the outcome of the fight is. You know, does he choose to go back and revert to the boxer move? You know, will that bamboozle Usyk? Because at heavyweight, he's not really come across that sort of style. But at the same time, coming up from cruiserweight, the lighter weights, he's potentially fought that sort of style before, and he may well be used to that, fighting the lighter fighters throughout his whole career. So I think it does depend on the night what Fury turns up, that we know what to expect from Usyk. He's a guy who goes into everyone's backyard almost every fight throughout his pro career. He's not scared of traveling as the away fighter as such. He's, like you mentioned earlier, he's certainly got the minerals. So I do think it depends on what Fury turns up. And as you said earlier, the best version of both of them, realistically, Fury should win down to sheer size, heavyweight experience, etc. But it really, really is a really tight fight. You mentioned 60-40 earlier. I think it's a very fair split on the two, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it does really depend on whether they both can be at their absolute best, because they'll need to be. Neither one of them's going to win this if they're not at their absolute best. But yeah, I do think that if they are both at the absolute top of their game, then Fury will be able to make that size count. But it's just a big if, isn't it? Because, as I say, it's a long time since that second Wilder performance, which was an absolutely phenomenal display. I mean, that was that'll have been 4 years ago by the time we get this fight, because that was end of Feb 2020, wasn't it? Just before COVID. And as amazing as that third fight was, you could look at it, although it's a fantastic win, you could look at it and say that it wasn't that great a performance from Fury, because he got put down twice. It was maybe a little bit too gung-ho at times. So I'm just fascinated by what are we going to get? What Fury are we going to get? I think we know, like you said, more accurately what we'll get from Usyk. I think we do. But I think with Fury, there are definitely more question marks as to what has he got left? Is he still capable of producing that really big performance, a really disciplined performance? And maybe he will kind of revert to the old ways more against Usyk. You just have to do whatever is the best method for you to win. You don't want to be celebrating. You don't want to get too carried away with ego. Ego plays an enormous part in boxing, of course. You're not really ever going to be a fighter without having that ego to believe that you're the best. You know, you think about these guys when they start out, they're dreaming, you know, going down the local gym and saying to themselves, and maybe saying to other people, I'm going to be a world champion. I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. And people look at them and just think, well, that's delusional. You know, who do you think you are? You know, you haven't done anything. You know, you're not even the best fighter in the gym at this point, and you're 12. But that's what they have to have, isn't it? They have to have that belief that is what's going to happen. But it can't translate into you abandoning the most effective method, um, because you want to win in the most crowd pleasing way, the most convincing way, which is the knockout. And Fury, I think, is that guy. He definitely wants the knockout now because he values it in a way that he probably didn't used to, as being the ultimate kind of method of victory, the ultimate assertion of your dominance over your fellow fighter. And maybe he won't be that satisfied if he ekes out a kind of points win against Usyk, because there's an argument then, isn't there? If it's close enough, then people always say, well, I don't think you won. Maybe there'll be 25% of people who don't believe that you really did enough, and that can really get to people. So yeah, I mean, maybe it'll suit Usyk if Fury looks to go out there and try and finish it inside the distance, because he can punch hard enough himself. We've seen that. And it's not like he's some kind of midget. People keep talking about the size difference, but he's a good solid 220. That works for him, doesn't it? I'm sure he'll be the same again. So he retains that mobility, but he's able to whack a bit.
What could be quite interesting as well is we know Usyk, once he gets in the ring with his opponent, he works out his opponent and what they're going to do stylistically and tactically within 2, 3, 4 rounds. Does Tyson Fury have to potentially change his game plan throughout this fight?
Yeah, maybe. And he's definitely capable of doing that. He's definitely capable of doing it. He could give Usyk a few different looks throughout the course of the fight. And I think that's potentially one of the things that's really interesting about it, because there aren't that many people who could do that. But to beat somebody like Usyk, maybe you do have to do that. I think the early rounds will be pretty cagey. It would be absolutely. I mean, it'd be great if Fury just went out there really aggressively and looked to really do some damage from the start, rather than stand off Usyk and be slightly wary of him, which is basically what everybody has done, isn't it? In his whole pro career, even fighters who've done well against him, they haven't really wanted to commit too much early on, because I think they feel like they could get made to look slightly foolish, because he does have that ability. But then again, he's never been in with somebody like Tyson Fury. That's just a fact. Given all his amateur experience, 350 odd fights, and the great wins he's had as a pro, he has not boxed somebody who is nearly 20 stone with the skill set and IQ of Tyson Fury. If Fury's on the top of his game, and that's as I say, that's just stating a fact.
Absolutely. I mean, and it was certainly in for a great night of boxing. If they both come out their best, it's certainly going to be a very, very intriguing and fascinating fight. And I spoke to Mauricio Sulaiman this week, and he's confirmed he has sanctioned the rematch. So we could well see 2 of these matchups next year.
Yeah, I mean, that I kind of expected that, because he has. It doesn't mean that the rest will, though. I mean, certainly the IBF, I don't think will. So I do expect that whatever happens in that fight on February the 17th, the belts will splinter after that, because the appeal of keeping your belt in it, of course, is that you have another huge fight and you get a big sanctioning fee, and Mauricio's eyeing that one up. But the IBF will take their belt out of that fight. I think we know that, basically. And maybe the WBO or the WBA will as well, because it won't be a unification, will it? Unless we have a no contest or a draw. If we have a winner on the 17th, then it'll be somebody with all the belts against somebody with none of them. So they wouldn't be obliged necessarily to sanction that, the four major sanctioning bodies, which will give some other people opportunities, which is a good thing, I think, actually, because for a long time now, it's been hard, isn't it, to get a shot at a world title, because we've had rematches, we've had a trilogy, we've had COVID, all the belts have been tied up by 2 people, like I said. So if you look back on it, not that many people have managed to fight for the world heavyweight title. And I know that a lot of boxing fans don't like the fact that we've got 4 world titles, but the bonus to it is that people get opportunities. That hasn't really been the case in recent times, and I've kind of missed that. To be honest. So you've got all this crop of fighters, most of whom are on that card actually on the 23rd, who are just hovering and waiting for a chance. And I think whatever happens in that first fight in February, then some people are going to get chances subsequent to that.
Absolutely. Like I said, makes it very, very interesting. Andy, thank you very much for your time today. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, no problem.